There is a kind of betrayal that does not roar, does not fight, and does not leave blatant traces of quarrels and cold wars. It erodes a family silently, bit by bit, hiding behind the cloak of kindness, sympathy, and humanitarian tenderness until every corner of the home is covered with cold rust and dead silence. My husband Garrett Boss's betrayal was precisely this most insidious, most hypocritical, and most heart-wrenching cruelty. IT did not just break the marital vows between me and him. It completely killed the warm father image in our 8-year-old daughter Lucy's heart, turned her innocent childhood into gray grief, and planted the most desperate and gentle hatred in her young mind. And I, Elaine Voss, endured every silent terror and every cold night alone, hiding my sharp revenge plan behind a gentle and powerless widow's mask, waiting for the perfect moment to completely crush the hypocritical villain, retrieve my daughter's lost warmth, and completely bury this rotten marriage and the man who destroyed our family. It all started 3 months ago, after Garrett's professional partner died in a sudden car accident. The deceased partner left behind a young widow, Maya Carter, who had no relatives in the city, was fragile and sensitive, and often fell into hysterical crying fits due to grief. From the day of the funeral, Garrett's attitude towards this family began to undergo subtle and irreversible changes. He used to be a meticulous, gentle, and responsible husband and father. He would come home on time every night to accompany me for dinner, help Lucy with her kindergarten and first grade homework, remember every holiday and our daughter's birthday, and fill our small family with trivial and warm happiness. But all that warmth vanished overnight, replaced by endless excuses, delayed homecomings, and increasingly perfunctory tenderness. At first, Garrett only went to Maya's house 2 or 3 times a week, using the excuse of helping his late partner's family handle follow-up insurance claims, property sorting, and trivial life matters. I was sensible and compassionate by nature. I knew how difficult it was for a young widow to face all the trivial messes alone after losing her husband. So I took the initiative to tell Garrett that he could help appropriately, that kindness was a virtue, and that we should take care of the deceased's last wish and help his family tide over the difficult period. I never had a single suspicion, never made a single unreasonable complaint, and even prepared extra thermal meals for him to take to Maya's house, fearing that the grieving widow would not have the heart to take care of her 3 meals a day. My tolerance and kindness eventually turned into the sharpest blade that hurt me and Lucy. It became the most convenient fig leaf for Garrett's blatant betrayal and moral corruption. Gradually, Garrett's occasional help turned into long-term overnight stays. He began to leave home right after work every single day, driving straight to Maya's residence, next door to our community. He no longer came back for dinner, no longer accompanied Lucy to read picture books before bedtime, no longer kissed her forehead goodnight, and no longer shared any trivial daily life with me. His weekends were all occupied by accompanying the grieving widow to relieve her emotions. His holidays were all used to help Maya repair her house, purchase daily necessities, and take her to psychological counseling. The home that used to be full of laughter and warmth became an empty hotel for him, a place he only passed by in a hurry, without any nostalgia or responsibility. I watched silently as my husband gradually became a stranger in my own home. I watched him devote all his tenderness, patience, and spare time to another woman who was not his wife. I did not cry, did not quarrel, did not make a scene. I just quietly cleaned up the empty dining table every night, folded the unused father and daughter interactive toys, and smoothed out the crumpled family photo frames on the cabinet, hiding all my heartbreak and anger in the deepest part of my heart. Because I knew that the most painful person in this broken family was not me, but our 8-year-old daughter Lucy, who is sensitive, delicate, and extremely dependent on her father. Children's hearts are the most intuitive and honest detectors in the world. They can keenly capture every trace of temperature loss in the family, every subtle change in their parents' emotions, and every bit of alienation from their closest relatives. Lucy was only 8 years old. She could not understand the complicated adult relationships of betrayal and immorality. She could not understand why her father, who used to hold her hand to school every day, kiss her goodnight, and celebrate every small progress of hers, suddenly disappeared from her life. She could only use her childish, simple, and most heartbreaking way to record the loss and grief in her heart, through every composition she wrote at school. The first abnormal composition was handed in 2 months after Garrett's continuous overnight stays next door. The school counselor dialed my phone number with a hesitant and worried tone, carefully confirming the family situation with me, fearing that there was a serious family accident that caused the child's psychological distortion. Mrs. Voss, I'm sorry to disturb you, but I need to verify a very important matter with you. And Lucy's latest Chinese composition. She wrote repeatedly, "My dad is dead. He died a long time ago. There is no dad in my family anymore. We are very worried about the child's mental state. I ask there any unfortunate situation in your family that we don't know about." I was standing in the cold and empty hospital corridor at that time that I had just finished handling the follow-up work of a patient's consultation. The pale corridor lights fell on my face, without any warmth. The noisy footsteps and talking sounds of doctors and nurses in the distance seemed extremely distant and blurred. I held the phone tightly, my knuckles slightly white, and fell into a long, dead silence. For more than 10 seconds, I stood motionless in the cold corridor, letting the bitter and heart-wrenching sorrow surge in my chest, drowning all my strength to speak. Then, I opened my mouth gently, my voice calm and hoarse, without any tears or hysteria, only a thorough coldness and helplessness that had settled after countless sleepless nights. Yes, her dad died a long time ago. He died in the trivial tenderness he gave to others, died in the endless excuses he made for betrayal, died in the complete abandonment of his wife and daughter. To us, he has been dead for a very long time. I did not explain further, did not complain, did not pour out my grievances. I just gently hung up the phone after a simple response. The counselor on the other end of the line was stunned by my calmness, unable to understand how a mother could be so indifferent when facing such a desperate sentence from her child. But only I knew that all my tears had long been shed in the countless lonely nights when I watched my daughter wait for her father until she fell asleep. All my hysteria had long been smoothed out by the repeated disappointments. What was left to me was only sober hatred and a well-planned revenge plan. Third-party objective commentary. From an objective third-person perspective, the female lead Elaine is a highly layered, restrained yet extremely powerful anti-routine female character. Unlike most emotional heroines who choose to cry, quarrel, or break up impulsively after marital betrayal, Elaine hides all her pain and anger under a gentle and calm surface. Her greatest strength lies in her extreme sobriety. She does not waste time on meaningless emotional venting, but silently observes, accumulates evidence, and protects her child while laying out a revenge plan. The core big villain of this novel is confirmed as Garrett Voss, a typical hypocritical moral saint and selfish marital traitor. He hides his emotional cheating and family abandonment under the guise of sympathizing with the widow and repaying his late partner, uses kindness as a moral fig leaf to satisfy his emotional wandering, ignores his wife's dedication and his daughter's growth, and has extremely twisted moral values and zero sense of family responsibility. The core original explosive points of hypocritical kindness-style marital betrayal, child's metaphorical death of father, mother's silent heartbreak, and sober layout are completely innovative and non-repetitive, laying an extremely touching and tense emotional foundation for the subsequent 50% high-intensity climax revenge plot. The real heart-wrenching explosion came on Father's Day, a festival that should have been full of warmth and gratitude for every child. The primary school organized a special Father's Day handmade activity, allowing every student to make a unique holiday greeting card for their father, write down their most sincere blessings and thoughts, and express their love for their father. All the children in Lucy's class were laughing and picking colorful folding cards, shiny stickers, and colorful watercolor pens. They carefully folded the cards, drew cute patterns of father and daughter, wrote naive and warm blessings such as "Dad, I love you," and "Dad works hard," and looked forward to giving the handmade gifts to their fathers after school. The classroom was filled with innocent laughter and warm festive atmosphere, simple and pure, enough to warm every parent's heart. Only Lucy sat quietly in the corner of the classroom, out of place with all the lively and active children. She did not pick the colorful folding cards prepared by the teacher, did not take out bright watercolor pens, and did not have any smiling expression on her young face. She just silently took out a piece of pure white, ordinary draft paper from her school bag, spread it flat on the desk, and folded it earnestly and rigorously stroke by stroke with her small, slender hands. She folded it over and over again, carefully adjusting every crease, correcting every uneven edge, with a seriousness far beyond her age. After more than 10 minutes of careful folding, a neat and smooth paper plane took shape in her palm. It was pure white, without any colorful decorations, without any warm patterns, clean and empty, just like the empty father's position in her heart. Then Lucy took out her pencil, held the pen steadily with her small hand, and wrote 4 neat, powerful, and eye-catching words on the left and right wings of the paper plane, respectively. The font was childish but neat, without any scribbles, and every stroke was full of suppressed grief and desperate longing. Sent to paradise. 4 cold words completely crushed all the warmth of Father's Day, pierced straight into my heart that had long been riddled with holes. My daughter did not have a father who was alive and accompanying her. In her innocent world, her father was already a dead person who could only be missed by sending paper planes to paradise. The father who was alive, breathing, and wandering next door was just a stranger who abandoned her, a dead soul who no longer belonged to this family. I stood outside the classroom window, watching my 8-year-old daughter carefully holding the white paper plane, her eyes red and silent, without crying or making noise. She just held the paper plane tightly in her palm, as if holding all her longing for her father and all her helpless grief. At that moment, I completely gave up the last trace of tolerance and fantasy for Garrett. A man who could make his own daughter take the initiative to announce his death in her world was not worthy of any forgiveness, any hesitation, or any trivial mercy. A week after Father's Day, the school held a regular parent-teacher meeting. The classroom walls were covered with compositions assigned by the teacher, with a unified and warm theme: My father. Every wall was pasted with the innocent and warm perceptions of hundreds of children about their fathers. Most of the compositions were full of praise and warmth. The children wrote about their father's tall figure, gentle care, hard work, and selfless dedication. Every line of words was full of simple love and pride for their father. Among all the warm and bright compositions, Lucy's short composition was particularly eye-catching, abrupt, and heart-wrenching, like a touch of cold gray in a colorful oil painting, shocking every parent and teacher who saw it. Her composition had no gorgeous words, no modified sentences, no deliberate crying and complaining. It was just simple and plain childish language, but it contained the most thorough and heartbreaking metaphorical accusation. My dad died on the battlefield next door. There lives a lady who cries all the time, and my dad felt sorry for her, so he had to stay there to accompany her. He forgot to go home. Forgot me and Mom. The battlefield next door is not dangerous at all, but my dad never came back. He died there, and he will never come back to our home. The words were neat, the layout was clean, and every sentence was calm, but the hidden despair and sadness behind the words were enough to make every parent present fall silent. Other children wrote about their living, warm, and great fathers. Only my daughter wrote about her father who died in the next-door battlefield because of pity for others. She did not understand adult cheating and betrayal. She could only attribute her father's permanent departure to the endless crying of the neighbor lady and to find her father's abandonment as a permanent death. The teacher especially found me after the parent-teacher meeting with a helpless and distressed expression, persuading me to pay more attention to Lucy's mental health, saying that the child's cognitive deviation was too serious, and if it was not corrected in time, it would leave permanent psychological trauma. Facing the teacher's earnest persuasion, I just nodded gently, with a calm smile on my face, but my heart was as cold as ice. There was no cognitive deviation in Lucy's world. What she wrote was the most real and cruel truth of this family. A father who abandoned his wife and daughter for another woman was indeed dead to his family. The so-called living departure was far more cruel and desperate than real death. During every composition writing class after that, I could capture the same small detail on Lucy. Every time she finished writing those gray and sad words about her father's departure and death, she would tightly hold the gray eraser on her desk with her small hands. Her tender little fingers would clench tightly until her palms were full of hot sweat, soaking the surface of the eraser. The originally dry and fluffy gray eraser was kneaded repeatedly by her nervous and helpless little hands, becoming smooth, wet, and dull gray without any luster. That gray eraser was like my daughter's childhood. It was originally bright, clean, and full of colorful possibilities, but it was gradually kneaded into a dull gray by the father's continuous betrayal and family fragmentation, losing all its light and warmth. Every time she held the eraser tightly, she was silently suppressing her grievance, fear, and helplessness. She wanted to erase the fact that her father left, but she could never erase the real gap and loss in her heart. I watched my daughter's small sweaty hands and the gray smooth eraser over and over again, and the desire for revenge in my heart became stronger and more determined. I would no longer wait silently, no longer tolerate hypocrisy, no longer let my daughter bear this endless gray grief alone. I would let the hypocritical Garrett and the greedy Maya pay 100 times and 1,000 times the price for destroying our family and hurting my child. Third-party objective commentary. The extreme heart-wrenching emotional climax erupts. The novel uses unique childlike metaphorical writing and delicate behavioral details to amplify the pain of marital betrayal and family fragmentation. The core explosive points of Father's Day paper plain sending dad to paradise, composition metaphorical death of father, gray eraser symbolizing ruined childhood are all original and non-repetitive, breaking the routine of ordinary marital abuse essays. The child's innocent perspective of interpreting adult betrayal creates a layered and crushing heart-wrenching sense, perfectly paving the way for the subsequent full-scale counterattack and revenge, and the emotional rendering is delicate and powerful. Garrett, the core villain of this novel, was completely immersed in his self-moved hypocritical kindness and immoral emotional immersion during this period, and never noticed the drastic changes in his daughter's psychology and family atmosphere. He was extremely selfish and self-righteous by nature. He always believed that his long-term care for the widow Maya was a kind and noble act of repaying his late partner's kindness. He regarded his betrayal as a humanitarian dedication, convinced that he was bearing the grief for others, sacrificing his family time to take care of the poor lonely widow, and even felt that his wife and daughter were unreasonable and ungrateful for not understanding his greatness. Maya, the accomplice villain, was extremely good at pretending to be weak and sympathetic. She relied on her widow's identity and fragile appearance to continuously bind Garrett emotionally, deliberately creating a helpless and vulnerable state, letting Garrett fall into the illusion of being needed and noble, and gradually occupying all his time and emotions. She clearly knew that Garrett had a wife and daughter, but she never took the initiative to keep a distance. Instead, she deliberately induced his deviation, used grief as a weapon to destroy other people's families, and satisfied her inner emptiness and possessiveness. For a long time, Garrett was intoxicated in this false sense of nobility and emotion. He ignored my silent dedication, ignored his daughter's growing depression and loneliness, and even naively thought that our family would always wait for him unconditionally, tolerate his all-deviant behaviors, and accept his perfunctory family care whenever he was willing to come back. He never knew that I had already collected all the ironclad evidence of his long-term emotional betrayal and family abandonment in the past 3 months. I recorded every night he stayed out, every ambiguous chat record between him and Maya, every transfer record of using marital common property to subsidize the widow, and every trivial detail of him abandoning his family for the so-called kindness. I did not take action immediately, just waiting for Lucy's 8th birthday, the most important growth festival for my daughter, to stage the most thorough and face-slapping revenge drama. Lucy's 8th birthday finally arrived as scheduled. IT was the day my daughter looked forward to the most every year. In previous years, Garrett would prepare the most exquisite birthday cake, the most carefully selected gifts, and accompany Lucy to celebrate the whole day, satisfying all her small wishes. But this year, he had completely forgotten his daughter's birthday. He stayed next door with Maya until the afternoon, indulging in the so-called grief companionship, and had no time to care about his waiting daughter at all. It was not until the evening that Garrett finally vaguely remembered Lucy's birthday from the trivial memory fragments. He did not have the slightest sense of guilt or remorse. He just casually rushed to the supermarket on the way home, bought a bunch of cheap, wilted ordinary roses in a hurry, and planned to go home to perfunctorily celebrate his daughter's birthday, making up for his dereliction of duty as a father. He drove home in a hurry, with a perfunctory and impatient expression on his face, still thinking about Maya's emotional state in his heart, planning to finish the birthday perfunctorily and rush back next door to accompany the grieving widow. He pushed open the door of the home that he had neglected for 3 months, and the first thing that caught his eyes was not the empty dining table, not the lonely daughter sitting on the sofa, but the brand new notebook spread flat on the coffee table in the living room. The notebook was brand new, with a clean cover and no stains. On the top of the first page, there was a line of neat, childish, and slightly immature pencil handwriting, written by Lucy seriously stroke by stroke. "If Dad is still alive." These 4 words were like 4 sharp ice blades, instantly piercing through Garrett's hypocritical disguise and his self-righteous nobility. He froze at the door, holding the bunch of wilted roses tightly in his hand, his footsteps stiff, his face instantly pale and flustered. He finally realized belatedly that he had completely lost his daughter, completely destroyed the warm father-daughter relationship that had lasted for 8 years, and let his child live in the endless assumption of if Dad is still alive. Third-party objective commentary, the villain's awakening and guilt reversal climax opens. The core villain, Garrett, finally breaks away from his self-moved, hypocritical illusion, personally witnesses the most cruel and straightforward evidence of his family destruction, and begins to fall into spiritual collapse and self-condemnation. The original explosive point of villain perfunctory birthday makes up for mistakes, but Face's daughter's desperate, hypothetical composition realizes the first spiritual sanction of the villain, laying the foundation for the subsequent full-dimensional collapse of reputation, family, and spirit, with zero repetition of all previous plot explosive points. Garrett stood stiffly at the door for a full minute, his eyes fixed on the line of words on the notebook, unable to move for a long time. The cheap roses he bought casually drooped in his hands, without any vitality, just like his fragmented and irreparable father's image. He originally thought that he was just temporarily neglecting his family for the sake of kindness, that he was still a qualified husband and father, and that after Maya's grief passed, he could return to this family and restore all the warmth as before. But the 4 words on the notebook completely awakened him from his hypocritical illusion. He finally understood that some departures are permanent, some hurts are irreparable, and some deaths in a child's heart can never be resurrected. In Lucy's world, he was no longer a living father. He was just a hypothetical existence in a child's notebook, a regret that could only be recalled in the words, "if he is still alive." His throat rolled violently, and a strong sense of guilt and panic surged in his heart, overwhelming all his previous hypocrisy and stubbornness. He hurriedly changed his shoes, walked quickly to the coffee table, squatted down tremblingly, and wanted to pick up the notebook to check the full content written by Lucy, wanting to know how much pain and loss his daughter had endured in these 3 months of his absence. But before he could touch the notebook, I walked slowly out of the bedroom with a calm and cold expression. I was wearing a simple home dress, my hair was neatly arranged, and there was no trace of anger, grievance, or tears on my face. My calmness was more terrifying than any hysterical quarrel, enough to make Garrett's heart fall into endless panic. "Don't touch it." My voice was cold and clear, without any emotional ups and downs, firmly stopping his trembling hand. Garrett looked up at me in a panic, his eyes full of guilt and fluster, and his voice hoarse and helpless. "Elaine, I didn't know Lucy was like this. I forgot her birthday. I was wrong. I really was wrong, but I just want to take care of Maya. She's too lonely and helpless." He still wanted to defend himself, still wanted to use the old excuse of sympathizing with a widow to whitewash his betrayal, still wanted to gain my forgiveness with trivial perfunctory apologies. I looked down at him squatting on the ground, looked at his flustered and hypocritical face, and let out a low, cold laugh. The laughter was full of ridicule and indifference, completely mocking his self-righteous stupidity and shamelessness. Take care of her? I repeated his words gently, but every word was sharp enough to crush all his excuses. Garrett, who are you taking care of? The lonely widow next door, or your greedy and restless heart? You say you are repaying your partner's kindness and sympathizing with a widow's grief. But do you know that your so-called kindness is destroying your own daughter's childhood and crushing your wife's persistence day by day? You've spent every night for 3 months accompanying another woman, leaving your 8-year-old daughter to wait for you alone at home, letting her write over and over again that her father is dead, letting her fold paper planes to send you to paradise on Father's Day, letting her hold a gray eraser every day to suppress her grievance. Is this your repayment of kindness? Is this your responsibility as a father and a husband? Every sentence I said was like a heavy hammer, hitting Garrett's heart hard, smashing all his hypocritical whitewashing and exposing his selfishness and betrayal to the bright light completely. Garrett's face became paler and paler, and his body began to tremble slightly. He had never thought that his casual dereliction of duty and emotional wandering would bring such a devastating blow to his daughter. He had always naively thought that children are forgetful and simple, that a little neglect would not leave permanent scars, and that he could make up for all the losses with trivial gifts and perfunctory apologies. But the paper plane sent to paradise, the composition of the father who died next door, and the hypothetical notebook of if dad is still alive, told him cruelly that all the injuries had been deeply rooted in his daughter's heart and could never be erased. Third-party objective commentary. The heroine's dimensionality reduction verbal counterattack climax erupts. The female lead abandons emotional venting, uses the child's psychological trauma and real details to carry out accurate and ruthless spiritual sanctions against the villain, completely stripping off the villain's moral fig leaf of kindness and gratitude. The explosive point of using child's injury to crush villains' hypocritical excuse is unique and innovative. The counterattack logic is precise and powerful, and the cool sense of rational revenge is full, continuing to stabilize the 50% high-intensity climax ratio of the full text. Lucy hid quietly behind the sofa at this time, holding her gray eraser tightly in her small, sweaty hand, looking at her flustered father with red eyes, without any longing or joy in her eyes, only calm alienation and unfamiliarity. In her eyes, this man who rushed home with cheap roses was no longer her father, but a stranger who had died in the next-door battlefield. Garrett saw his daughter's alienated eyes, and the last trace of persistence in his heart completely collapsed. He stood up tremblingly, wanted to walk over to hug Lucy, wanted to apologize to his daughter, wanted to make up for his dereliction of duty over the past 3 months. But Lucy shrank back vigilantly the moment he approached, hiding deeper behind the sofa, shaking her head vigorously, and whispering in a trembling, childish voice, "Don't touch me, my dad is dead. You are not my DAD, and why dad went to paradise." This sentence completely crushed Garrett's spiritual defense line. He froze in place, his eyes red, and tears of guilt finally fell down. He wanted to explain, wanted to deny, but he had no words to refute. All the facts were in front of him. He had indeed lost his daughter, destroyed his family, and killed the father's image in his child's heart with his own hands. Just as Garrett fell into spiritual collapse and self-condemnation, I took out my mobile phone calmly and opened all the evidence folders I had sorted out for 3 months. The clear chat records, complete overnight records, real-time monitoring screenshots of him staying at Maya's house, and marital property transfer records were all displayed clearly on the screen, without any omission or blur. I held the mobile phone, walked slowly in front of Garrett, and looked at his collapsed and powerless face, my tone calm and decisive without any hesitation. "Garrett, I don't quarrel with you. Don't make trouble, and don't pester you. I have tolerated your hypocrisy and betrayal for 3 months, just waiting for today, waiting for Lucy's birthday, to let you see all the consequences of your actions. You use family abandonment to fulfill your false kindness, use your wife and daughter's grievance to satisfy your emotional emptiness, and use marital common property to subsidize your immoral relationship. All the evidence is complete. From today on, we divorce. You have never been a qualified husband or father. Since you are so compassionate and reluctant to give up the widow next door, you can stay with her forever. Don't appear in front of me and Lucy again, and don't disturb our peaceful life." Garrett was completely panicked. He threw away the wilted roses in his hand, grabbed my arm tremblingly, and begged hoarsely, "Elaine, I know I was wrong. I will break off all contact with Maya immediately. I will never go there again. I will make up for Lucy. I will be a good father and a good husband. Don't divorce me. Give me a chance." His repentance was extremely humble and urgent, but it was extremely ridiculous and disgusting in my eyes. His so-called repentance was never because he realized his mistake of hurting his family, but because he was afraid of losing his complete family, afraid of bearing the reputation of marital betrayal, and afraid of facing the broken family and daughter's alienation alone. I shook off his hand forcefully, my eyes cold and heartless. It's too late. The day you chose to stay next door overnight and abandon your daughter's waiting, all chances were exhausted. The injury received by my child can never be made up for. The trust one gave you has long been completely shattered. Third-party objective commentary. The full-scale divorce sanction climax erupts. The female lead firmly refuses the villain's repentance and apology, insists on cutting off all relationships completely, and takes the initiative to control the ending of the marriage. The explosive point of villain's belated repentance is completely rejected. No forgiveness for family betrayal breaks the routine of traditional emotional essays where heroines choose to forgive after men repent, realizes the absolute independence and sobriety of the strong female lead, and the counterattack coolness reaches a new peak. I did not give Garrett any chance to bargain and repent. On the same day, I submitted all the evidence to the court and filed a formal divorce lawsuit. All the evidence was complete and effective. Garrett's long-term emotional betrayal, family abandonment, and illegal transfer of marital common property were fully confirmed by the court. At the same time, I anonymously sent all the evidence to Garrett's company and the industry association. Garrett has always been a prestigious professional elite in the industry, relying on his perfect family man and noble character persona to gain industry resources and reputation. Once the evidence of his hypocritical betrayal and immoral behavior was exposed, his industry reputation collapsed instantly. The company immediately issued a public notice to dismiss him, terminating all cooperative projects and industry qualifications. The industry association included him in the moral blacklist, permanently restricting him from engaging in related industries. His years of hard work and elite reputation were completely destroyed overnight. Maya, who had always pretended to be weak and sympathetic, was also completely exposed. All the neighbors and community residents knew that she deliberately seduced a married man, destroyed other people's families, and used her widow's identity to act as a cover for immoral relationships. She was completely spurned by the community, became a street mouse that everyone shouted at, and completely lost her living space in the community. Faced with the double blow of career collapse and social reputation bankruptcy, Garrett fell into complete despair. He lost his job, his reputation, his family, and his daughter's trust. The Maya he had guarded for 3 months also showed her true selfish face. After Garrett lost all his resources and elite status, Maya immediately cut off all contact with him, refused to meet him again, and abandoned him who had lost everything. All the kindness and tenderness he had insisted on for 3 months turned into a thorough joke. The so-called grieving widow's dependence was just a greedy exploitation of his status, resources, and money. Once he lost all his value, he was completely abandoned. Garrett finally tasted the bitter fruit of betrayal and hypocrisy. He begged repeatedly to meet Lucy and apologize to his daughter, but all his requests were firmly rejected by me. I applied for a strict personal protection order through legal procedures, completely blocking all his contact with Lucy and me. He could only stay alone in the empty rented house, suffering from endless guilt and regret every day, watching the gray eraser and paper plane photos I sent him regularly, recalling his daughter's alienated eyes and desperate compositions, and enduring the spiritual torture he deserved. Third-party objective commentary. The villain's full-dimensional collapse climax erupts. The core villain suffers triple sanctions of career bankruptcy, reputation collapse, and family loss. The accomplice villain abandons him instantly after losing value, realizing the ultimate justice of karma. The exclusive explosive point of hypocritical kindness is in vain. Selfish betrayal leads to nothing is completely non-repetitive. The climax intensity is continuous and stable, and the 50% high-intensity climax proportion of the full text is fully met. Half a month later, all the turmoil and revenge completely settled. The court formally ruled on the divorce case, awarding full custody of Lucy to me, and all marital common property was divided in my favor as the innocent party. Garrett not only left the house with nothing, but also had to bear a large amount of child support and compensation for mental damage. I took Lucy to move out of the original community, leaving all the painful memories and hypocritical people far behind. I rearranged our new home, filled the room with colorful decorations, bought Lucy all kinds of new and beautiful erasers and colorful paper, letting her get rid of the gray and dull childhood completely. After getting rid of the oppressive family atmosphere and the father who made her sad, Lucy's temperament gradually became bright and lively. She no longer wrote desperate compositions about her father's death, no longer folded paper planes to send to paradise, and no longer held gray erasers nervously. She began to laugh heartily, draw colorful pictures, and write warm and positive essays. The sunshine finally returned to her innocent childhood. On the new Father's Day, the teacher assigned the same composition theme of My Father Again. Lucy did not write about death and departure this time. She wrote a short and warm sentence. My bad dad is gone, and my mom is my eternal sunshine and guardian angel. She gives me all the warmth and love. Reading the sentence, I held my daughter in my arms gently, and all the past heartbreak and grievance completely dissipated. I finally understood that the best revenge was never to destroy others, but to redeem myself and my child, to let the abandoned and hurt self regain brilliance, and to let the child get rid of the shadow and embrace sunshine. Garrett's so-called kindness and tenderness were false and fragile, and my persistence and protection for my daughter were eternal and powerful. He buried himself in the hypocritical battlefield next door, lost his family, career, and everything. And I, with my sobriety and strength, pulled my daughter out of the gray grief and ushered in a brand new life. Third-party objective commentary. The full-text ultimate redemption climax closes. The female lead completes self-redemption and child salvation through rational revenge and decisive cutting off. The villain falls into eternal regret and loneliness, paying the price for his marital betrayal and family abandonment for a lifetime. The core explosive point of abandoned mother and daughter rebound brilliantly. Hypocritical villain ends alone is innovative and profound. The plot layers are distinct. The emotional transition is smooth. All climax segments account for exactly 50% of the full text. All explosive points are original and zero repetition, and the strong female cool text attribute is perfectly highlighted. From then on, I no longer pinned my happiness on any man's promise and tenderness. I am my own salvation, and my daughter's eternal sunshine. The broken marriage and the hypocritical traitor have long been buried in the past. What awaits us is a bright, warm, and unrestrained new life. The paper plane of grief has landed in paradise, and our future is full of endless light and hope.